Hello, I'm Dr. Louise, and this is Dr. Louise Thinks, a channel dedicated to helping everyday folks connect with the healing power of philosophy. Over the past several videos, we have been exploring different aspects of friendship. We've talked about the purpose of friendship, the dark side of friendship, and what it means to be a good friend. If any of those spark your curiosity, be sure to check out the playlist I have on the philosophy of friendship. In today's episode, we are exploring the idea of friends with benefits. Now, exactly what we mean by friends with benefits can actually be a little bit tricky. The category suggests that we have a friendship relationship, which includes some extras that are not usually traditionally understood in the umbrella of friendship. When most people hear the phrase, they're likely to think of friends who are also having sex or in some way engaging in sexual activities. Philosopher Natasha McKeever points out that friends with benefits are often characterized by two people who do not consider themselves to be in a romantic relationship, but they do have sex at least on more than one occasion. The way McKeever's thinking about friends with benefits, if you have like a one-off sexual encounter with a friend, that doesn't count. That's not actually a friends with benefits relationship. Now, this kind of relationship provides a puzzle for philosophers. It challenges both the categories of friendship and the categories of romantic love. Modern folks typically understand romantic relationships to have a physical component that friendships don't have. But friends with benefits challenges that notion, and it makes us wonder whether a relationship with such physical activities might be able to remain solidly in the friendship category. One way to understand this question is to ask whether friendship is compatible with sex. In Natasha's article titled Friends with Benefits, Is Sex Compatible with Friendship?, she argues that sex is compatible. She points out that sex is compatible with three core characteristics of friendship, specifically mutual liking, mutual caring, and mutual sharing. According to McKeever, none of these aspects of friendship are undermined by sex, and at least two of them might even be enhanced by sex. Because sex is, at least ideally, something that involves each partner showing sensitivity, care, and concern to each other, this could enhance the mutual caring aspect of a friendship. Additionally, friendships are often strengthened by having shared activities and sharing personal information. Certainly, sex can be one such activity, and it necessarily involves sharing personal information that few people gain access to. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that in order to have a flourishing friendship, we need to have sex. But McKeever is arguing that sex isn't necessarily getting in the way of these aspects of friendship. And we can see, at least theoretically, how in the right circumstances, sex might be an enhancement to these aspects of friendship. Having said that, there are some big objections we need to explore before we can confidently say that sex and friendship are compatible. First, these kind of relationships, at a minimum, seem to blur the boundaries between friendship and romantic love. This can lead to uncertainty about what each person should expect from the other person. Here McKeever pulls on the work of Lawrence Thomas, who points out that friendship is a minimally structured social interaction, where how the parties interact with one another is not primarily a function of social roles. We can contrast this with the teacher-student relationship. Both teachers and students have robust social roles that they are supposed to fulfill in such a relationship. The teacher primarily provides guidance and information to the student, and in turn, the student focuses on learning and applying the information that the teacher has given them. This is why it is easy to see that sex is incompatible with a teacher-student relationship. There is no space within these defined roles for sex to be part of the equation. Friendships are not like the teacher-student roles. We don't have a lot of societally defined notions of what friendship is or what the details of a friendship ought to be. Thomas claims that this is also true for romantic relationships. The details of such relationships are largely left up to the particular preferences of the folks in the relationship. While society may provide some information about what friendships and romantic relationships should look like, it's not nearly as defined as something like the student-teacher relationship. McKeever points out that there is some important societal information that we do get about the details of relationships like friendships and romantic relationships. In romantic relationships, for example, physical affection is usually expected, while in friendship situations, it's optional. In romantic relationships, big life decisions are usually made together among the partners, where there seems to be no such obligation in friendship relationships. And in general, romantic relationships involve more responsibility to each partner to keep in contact, to spend time together, to be there for each other, and even to prioritize each other's needs. All of these are relevant in a friendship, but there is less expectation that each person works consistently toward them as is expected in a romantic relationship. So, while there may not be an explicit social script for friends with benefits, we might think that there's some kind of hybrid between the two categories. However, this creates an inherent kind of uncertainty about the expectations of the relationship and could eventually lead to heartbreak. McKeever acknowledges that friends with benefits do have this kind of uncertainty built in due to the lack of social script prescribing how the boundaries of the relationship should work. However, she does not think that this means that friends with benefits cannot exist as robust friendships. All it means is that anyone who chooses to be in such a relationship needs to have clear communication around expectations and the ground rules. This need for communication is easy to say, but hard to do. McKeever cites a 2009 scientific study that reported 85% of folks in friends with benefit relationships do not communicate about the expectations of the relationship, and 73% do not communicate directly about the ground rules. So this means anyone considering whether a friends with benefits situation could work for them really needs to get clear and honest about whether they are ready to go against the norm and have these robust kind of conversations. However, if you have an explicit conversation about the expectations of the relationship, things could still be a little bit tricky. For example, we may not be able to promise that, we aren't going to eventually catch feelings for the other person. To make such a promise would require that we have complete control over those kind of feelings, and that's just not how human beings work. Additionally, there may be power differentials between the friends and different gender expectations that might make any such promises or any even attempts at clear communication more challenging. McKeever still argues, though, that these challenges are manageable. Yes, there is uncertainty in these kind of relationships, and yes, this will require an ongoing conversation about expectations to ensure that everyone is on the same page. But the friends with benefits dynamics may have other advantages that simply outweigh these challenges. Another major objection to the friends with benefits model is that sex might be damaging to the friendship itself, perhaps even destroying the friendship. Often, this objection goes something like, if you have sex, then you're likely to fall in love, and that necessarily means you can't be friends. However, it's a bit silly to think that falling in love is incompatible with friendship. As Dossie Eaton and Janet Hardy point out in their 2011 book, The Ethical Slut, we do love our friends, and particularly those we have sex with. It's also a bit silly to suggest that simply because you have sex, you're necessarily going to fall in love with someone. It turns out that you can definitely have sex with people you do not love and never will love. It also turns out that you can definitely fall in love with someone without ever having sex. At most, we might be able to say that you're more likely to fall in love with someone if you have sex with them, but even that isn't obviously the case. The clearer case is that unreciprocated romantic love might damage a friendship. When such feelings are unreciprocated, it can bring up insecurity, possessiveness, and maybe jealousy. Over time, this can lead to hurt and anger and resentment, and it could mean that the friendship would not be able to continue. This is in part because sex has a social context with various meanings attached to it. We do not have sex in a vacuum, so each of us brings all those different meanings connected to the activity in whatever context we engage in it. According to McKeever, this is not evidence that friends with benefits should not exist or cannot exist, but it's rather evidence that folks in this kind of relationship need to discuss and understand how each person sees sex and whether any differences between them over the meaning of it might eventually lead to problems. Again, in order for a friends with benefits relationship to work as a friendship, the folks involved have to commit to the emotional work to manage any feelings of possessiveness or jealousy and romantic love that might come up. This is going to be necessary because the entire relationship is premised on the idea that you are having sex without it being committed to a romantic relationship, but it is within a relationship that is significant and intimate to both parties. McKeever concludes that friends with benefits can certainly exist and does not necessarily challenge our notions of friendship or romantic relationships. However, maintaining a friends with benefits relationship will require a lot of direct communication and work to navigate the dynamics that are inherent in the relationship. Whether this work is worth it or not is going to depend a lot on the individual and whatever benefits the two people are perceiving in this structure of relationship. Now, I don't know about you, but a loving relationship that requires a lot of robust communication doesn't seem that bad to me. While there are specific challenges that McKeever describes with friends with benefits, it seems to me that the solution, which is mostly communication, getting clear on expectations, and noticing how society's ideas might be impacting the relationship, these all seem like excellent things to have in any kind of relationship, especially in any kind of friendship. Now, I've never personally had a friends with benefits relationship, but I know that my previous friendship relationships and probably my romantic relationships as well would have benefited from explicit communication around a lot of these ideas. I think I would have benefited especially from taking the time to understand how the other person was thinking about the structure of our relationship and using that to help set expectations within the relationship. But I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a friends with benefits type relationship? Do you agree with McKeever that friends with benefits truly is just a flavor of friendship? Could you ever imagine yourself being in a friends with benefits relationship, or would you be too nervous that the sex would change the dynamic too much? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's adventure through practical philosophy, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And until next time, stay curious, be thoughtful, and keep asking those questions. Bye-bye.